All right. With that said, today we're going to hear from naturalist Don Endicott. If you follow us on social media, you will have most likely seen Don alongside two biologists talk about the Peregrine Falcons as a part of our Scientists Speak series. I'm very excited to see this presentation and learn more. Don is incredibly active in the environmental community as a Mission Trails regional park trail guide, interpretive guide for the National Association of Interpretation, member of Project Wildlife's bat team under the San Diego Humane Society, and also as a public educator for the San Diego Natural History Museum. And that is just scratching the surface. Don has also presented on bats and mountain lions at regional venues and conducts field studies and field research on bats to assess their presence and seasonal activities. And alongside that, he's also been an active member of this VIP program as well. He's been a part of our park since 2011 with the herpetofauna monitoring and intertidal surveys, as well as the Peregrine Falcon nesting monitoring since 2016. So I am very, very excited to hear from Don. With that said, I would like to welcome Don Endicott to hear his presentation. So Don, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Don's muted.
How about now?
There you
I
go.
can hear you now.
Just missed my whole talk. Sorry. Well, welcome everyone. This is my inaugural Zoom presentation. I'm usually in front of an audience at campfire talks or walking through mission trails at night or such. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'll try to look in the right direction on the camera. That's a little strange. So I'm happy to say that we have, I don't know whose mic that is.
Oh no.
Don,
Hey, Don, I think you're muted one more time. Let me go ahead and see where I can find you and unmute you.
I show I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know either. All right.
So rewind. Thanks everyone for joining me. I'll try not to repeat too much. Again, this is my first Zoom session as a presenter, so we'll see how that goes. A little different, not having direct contact with audiences around campfire talks or in amphitheaters, but we'll give that a try. This presentation is multimedia. There's a PowerPoint that will follow. But when I give this talk for children, I usually like to start out with Perry. Kids always like puppets. Oops, that's good. This is Perry. Perry's a little oversized. See it that way. And Perry should be about the size of a crow. So a good sized bird. Of course, they fly a little differently from crows, but anyway, Perry says hello. And let's see, the format again is I'll present a little while. So Tara will run the timer and open it up to questions, use chat. I will try not to keep track of that so that I can keep going with the presentation. And the only other little glitch here is because I'm using a laptop with the remote screen, I will have to start my presentation, pause a moment to go set it so you can see the whole screen, and then I'll be right back. So let's try that out. We're gonna go here. And, so a quick sound check. Can you see the presentation? Thumbs up.
Sure can.
All right, thanks. And we're going to go over here. So we're going to talk about the fastest animal in the world, which makes it for some tricky photography at times. So first of all, I'd like to show a little video clip. We banded 3 chicks on the 21st, so a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and the climbing biologist, Diego, did this little slow-mo from the nest site. So let's see if this plays. Okay. All right, that's our grand opening. So let's talk a little bit about peregrines. Peregrine means wanderer. They live worldwide except Antarctica. They're a bird hunter, a bird eater. Their claim to fame is ability to dive at speeds in excess of 200 miles an hour. I've seen that a few times. Most of the time they're flying more like 60 miles an hour on the horizontal, but anyway, they have some special adaptations that we'll talk about. They were near extinction, especially in the US in the 1960s. In fact, I think the first one I saw that I can recollect seeing was after some restoration efforts that we'll talk about, and a juvenile that showed up at the San Diego River Channel. One night I was down photographing shorebirds and suddenly all hell broke loose. Everybody's flying around and then this young peregrine showed up. So the good news is they're coming back strong. So where in the world do they live? Again, everywhere but Antarctica. Called the wanderer. Those that nest up in the northern parts of Alaska and Canada actually fly all the way down to South America, a round trip of 15,000 miles. Our peregrines are less ambitious, and they pretty much stay around home. San Diego is a great place, and they don't really have a reason to go elsewhere. I showed you Perry. This is a little more realistic relative size illustration of this young girl. So wingspan 3 feet or more, body length a couple of feet. The males are smaller than the females by a third. In fact, the females are called falcons and the males are called tercels. And you actually, after you spend some time watching them, you can differentiate them both by size and how they fly, even at 300, 400, 500 feet away, which is pretty much where I see them. And there's some weights. So sharp pointed wings, they're known, that's what falcons are known for. They don't have slots in the wings like hawks or crows. They're not about soaring, although they can soar. They're all about speed. Sharp talons. You certainly don't want to see one of those coming at you, whether or not you're a bird, potential prey item, or a climbing biologist. In fact, I have a video at the end that can show you some of the marks you might get from those fantastic toes. Interestingly, when we band the chicks, their feet are nearly adult size, so they look like they're all feet. They have a Malar Stripe. That's the dark patch under the eyes. That serves the same role as eye black for baseball or football players, soccer players, reduces the glare so they can see better. They can see up to a mile. I forget what the magnification is, but when I'm watching them up on the cliff tops, they have no question where I am or what I'm about, and I'm looking through binoculars to pick them up. So great vision. Tomial tooth, won't talk about that, but I do want to talk about the tubercle, which is this little bone. It's right on the side. You can see the illustration. It's pretty much like the nasal, on the front of a jet engine. It sort of blocks the airflow. And one of its primary role is it keeps the falcon's lungs from overinflating when it's going 200 miles an hour. It's basically disrupting that flow enough so it doesn't basically explode at 200-mile-an-hour flight. And there's a little picture of a museum specimen showing a little more how that works. Third eyelid, nictitating membrane. Many birds have these, but that also helps protect its eye when it's flying at speed. So those are its goggles. So hunting. I mentioned that they can fly 200 miles an hour. That's one of their known techniques. They basically fly up high where prey birds aren't necessarily looking, and then dive at high speed and swipe them with a toe. They have no qualms about fending off presumed invaders. I have another little video showing them chasing down brown pelicans. I've watched that off the end of the point too. They have no trouble chasing. So they're a bird with attitude. They tend to hunt individually most of the year, but during the breeding season, they pair up because the female needs to spend time on the nest. The male does almost all the hunting during that period. And there's a ritualized behavior. I'll show you some photos of that, where they do what's called a prey exchange. And this is before they've even mated. The male catches a prey item. These guys tend to like pigeons. One time they were called duck hawks. Often it could be smaller birds. He flies in with the present, turns upside down and presents it to the female, and she takes it. So that's the ritual. And then when she's on the nest, his job is to bring that food to her. And sometimes they tag team. I saw a great hunt on Monday, actually. I was down checking on the chicks from below, and when you have two birds that can fly that fast, a prey bird has almost no chance at all. So I watched it. It was low to the right. First one saw the bird. It came rapidly out. The bird's avoiding it. The other one comes from another angle, takes a swipe. Its third turn, and it's gone. So they're very good at that. Courtship and mating takes place in the spring, usually February here in San Diego. Picture on the upper right was, or on the upper photo was obviously the female. The male is just leaving, having mated. And the photo on the left shows a prey exchange. So the female's coming up beneath, male's holding it out, and she takes that. It has to do with not only making sure that they're going to be good with each other, but it also helps energize the hormones and such. And mating can take place over many days. So what do the eggs look like? And I can't really swap back and forth easily. So I will show you a replica egg. They're about the size of a chicken egg. They're camouflage color, usually 3 to 4. Their nest is, I mean, that's generous to call it a nest. Usually it's just a scrape, and a suitable protected area. Needs to have some temperature moderation, not subject to predators. And the female will lay the eggs in succession, but through how she broods them, they kind of hatch close to the same time. And here on the coast, they're mostly cliff ledges and some kind of overhang. So here are 4 of our peregrines from 2 years ago. And I think you can barely see they have some bling. I think I saw Patricia Simpson's on. She was here for that banding event. They hatched about 31 days. I'll talk about banding in a moment. We tried to band them around 21 days before they might try to escape. Diego, the banding biologist, refers to them as kind of rubbery at this stage, but completely dependent on appearance. I have a third video to show you that there's another site I monitor, and a chance to see how the female kind of corrals them while they're in the nest. And I'm going to show another video, hopefully. These are the same 4. And that dark cable is the climbing rope, or the climber belayed down. So was everybody able to see that? Thumbs up? Awesome, thanks. And this is this particular nest. They've used a couple of sites, actually 3 sites that I'm aware of since 2015, but they've been here the last few years. Kind of determined by the male. Our male has a band 98M, so he's been a consistent factor here. We're on our 3rd female. It's kind of a hard life, all sorts of threats. But he kind of determines, attracts the mate, and then has a lot of the responsibility of keeping everyone fed while they're nesting. Monitoring, I do this with the kind of a combination. It's Cabrillo. It's the U.S. Navy and it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I see Patricia's right here. That's at our primary site. That's Chief Pagel, who with Fish and Wildlife, he was the one who originally banded here. And I think I saw Bob Sharp on earlier. Bob's been down with us a few times. So during breeding season, keep tabs on them, try to see who's who, because this year we had a new female. Turns out she's not banded, so we don't really know where she originated. Verify who the male is, and then try to get the timing, because we want to get to the nest at 21 days. This nest is 400 feet above me. It's 400 to 500 feet distance if you figured out the angle. These are the size of a crow. Even with binoculars, there's no chance you can look and see what's going on. So everything about monitoring is inferring from their behavior what they're actually doing. And so I try to guess when eggs are laid, and then that starts the calendar. And again, we try to find out, again, infer after laying, do the countdown, how long till they're probably hatched. And when food deliveries start increasing, there are chicks. And actually been pretty close within a couple of days the last couple of years. So I kind of get the habit. I just have a little inset here. This is one of 4 quadrants. I created some mapping so I can keep tabs of where everyone is, their perches, and then try to, it's important to figure out where the nest is, because you don't want to just jump off the edge of a cliff or rope over and not find the nest. So banding is, again, under the authority of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and USGS. Try to do it 20 to 21 days. We swap bands. There's a silver band that has an identification number, multi-digit, not possible to read at a distance. And then they have what's called a colored band. Here we've been using black with white letters, and those may or may not be visible in the spotting scope or binoculars, but when I take telephoto photos, I can blow them up and identify, again, the adults. I have the video that the park did a few years ago. One of the reasons we're banding here is there are 2 different endangered species in San Diego. Well, peregrines aren't endangered anymore, but they were, the least tern. So peregrines were reintroduced to San Diego, coastal San Diego, and some of those new folks found it is easy to fly over to Coronado and harvest least terns. So when that happens, you'd want to know who was doing it, and then they can be recaptured and transported basically out of the region. That's the penalty, is excommunication. So that banding is going on here through a contract actually with the U.S. Navy, because we're on property that's officially Navy, but it borders Cabrillo. This is a little bit what banding looks like. Again, they're pretty small and compact. You try to do it early in the morning. You try to keep the temperatures low, and it's because you don't want these guys to overheat. There's our climbing biologist, Diego, on the lower left. And Satira, is this a good time for questions? I'm not monitoring that part, so.
You are right on the button, yes. We have one question so far from Muriel Coleman. She has asked if you have used drones in the past to monitor the nests.
If I have which?
If you have used drones to monitor the nest.
No, and peregrines are pretty hardy birds and defensive, but areas where peregrines are nesting are off limits to drones, climbers, any other possible invasive activities that would disturb the nest. It's not so much that they might abandon it, and they're very territorial, but they might leave it long enough for someone else like a crow to fly in and take it. So no, drones aren't used. There is hope to put a radio collar on one of them to see where they go. Some nests, especially in metropolitan areas, they put webcams on, and so live cams, and monitor them. We've talked about that here, but it's not really a large enough space. And again, we don't want to disturb the show. So, but great question. That would be a much easier way to do it. I will mention in this long answer to a short question that we originally took a peek at the nest 3 weeks prior to when we banned it, because that's when it should have happened. It did in past years. And we had a big storm, if you remember, back in early March or so. A lot of rain, don't know what happened, but things seem to have been delayed. And the eggs were there, but there weren't any nestlings. So we came back, we looked and counted, there were 4 eggs. And so I just started to count down then, and fortunately they hatched for us. So, but we try to be as out of the way as possible. I do some monitoring at Yosemite for peregrines, not nearly as much as here. And in Yosemite, climbing routes that have peregrines on them are blocked off. I mean, they're totally isolated from any public activity, again, to avoid disturbance. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a question from Gail Kidder. She has asked, what are the adults doing when you banned?
Oh, well, they're upset. When Jeep did it originally, which I think was 2015, they basically attacked him. I mean, if you look at this video, he's all marked up. These guys dive, they screech, they put up a ruckus, but they haven't been making any contact. That first video that I showed you, or the one that slow motion, she was coming to defend the nest while he was in it. But even though it looks like she's a first-year mother, she was very generous with us, and no harm, no foul. It's a great time to get photos of them too, because they're really close to you.
We have another question from Cindy. She's asked, have falcons had to be relocated due to preying on terns recently, and were they the ones who live at Cabrillo?
No, the Cabrillo folks have been pretty cooperative in all the time that I've been monitoring, which goes back to 2016. They tend to be relocated back to Northern California from this area, but I don't know when the last relocation is. The terns are doing as well as I guess they can under other conditions, and our guys like pigeons. So no Cabrillo birds that I know of that have been relocated.
Great, thank you. And then we have 2 more questions. The first one is from Julie Nydam. She's asked, where have they subsequently found the banded chicks once grown?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I haven't heard of the location of any of our banded chicks. They have to disperse because peregrines are territorial. They won't accept their own progeny in their immediate territory, their hunting territory. So after a while, they hang around for a couple months learning to hunt and eat, and then they'll be chased away. And how far they go, I don't know. That would be a great research project to see. You have to have a band ID, and either it's because they were found dead, which of course you don't want, or you trapped them, or you had some occasion to photograph and document a band. So it's kind of tricky to see who's who unless you're really focused on it. But they're spreading east, they're spreading up and down the coast. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I would like to know where they go too.
Yeah, Sam said we should check with Keith Lombardo and Stephanie Root. She says she recalls them saying something about where the chicks have been found.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I could add that to the presentation.
Yeah. And then last question for this first Q&A round is from Warren Tam. He's asked, do you transport the chicks one at a time during banding?
So is that having to do with relocating birds or when we're banding?
It says banding. Warren, you can go off mute if you want to clarify your question.
Yeah, when he's bringing down the chicks to get banded, do you just move them one at a time, or do you transport the chicks at once?
Try to get them all at once. And you can see the little carrier. I don't know if I have another photo in this presentation. The little carrier on the lower right, that holds 4 chicks. And so it's sort of like a lunch cooler, a picnic cooler. When they were farther down, the first year, they were halfway down the cliff. So they were actually banded in the nest, which is the same way we tend to band golden eagles, for instance. You don't take them anywhere. You just sort of corral them inside the cavity and one at a time band them and leave. Here, because it's relatively high on the cliff, the biologist puts them in the carrier's lifted up to the top. We come over away from the edge where it's safe and then band them one at a time. Banding includes weighing them, taking measurements to help determine their age, determining gender, and logging that in a recording book along with the banding information. And then one at a time, they go back in the carrier and then carry them all back down and let them out one at a time. So there are different ways to do it, but generally you want to keep them together.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don. We do have a couple more questions. I will save the ones that we don't get to for you to answer at the very end, just so we can keep moving along.
Okay, and I will stick around as long as anyone has questions at the end as well. So this is a juvenile. This was 2 years ago also. You notice the color difference. They're this beautiful cinnamon and chocolate brown, these little margins around the feathers. I think they look more attractive than the adults, but that's just me. The timeline, hatch in 31 days. They'll fledge, learn to fly in 42 to 46. Today was day 42 for our current crop. And again, I have some news from yesterday from being down there. They're adult size, but obviously they need to learn the ropes for a very skilled style of flying. And they're dependent on their parents for up to 2 months because not only do you have to learn to fly, but you've got to learn to hunt. You've got to learn what to hunt, and you have to learn how to hunt. And those prey birds are certainly not interested in being caught. So they're pretty good at evading. That takes that 2-month period to learn the ropes. These are some more views of fledglings. On the lower photo, those two are kind of practicing the same maneuvers that sort of ingrained in them that the adults will have. So they're doing tag teaming, they're doing inverted flights, they're touching each other. It's pretty fun to see. I predict that you'll start seeing that if you'd be looking south from the whale station or so, you could start seeing that in the next few weeks at Cabrillo. And here's a little more fun and games. These are, again, 2 years ago. This is down lower near where I observed from. And the lower photo, again, 2 juveniles, you can tell by the color. It was kind of funny, the upper one there were 3 chicks, and I think this one had just gotten out of the nest that day, and it wasn't quite sure what to do. It was all the way near the bottom, so the other 2 kept showing up and saying, "Come on, let's get going." Yes, that's my interpretation anyway. But I finally figured it out. Some pretty grim statistics, although hatchlings learn to fly, their success is about 95%. Less than a third actually make it through that first year. So not exactly an easy life. And they can reproduce at 2 years of age. It doesn't always go well. This is last year. I think, Sam, you were with us on this ill-fated endeavor. We had the timing right, but behavior changed. I started seeing a foreign bird that I didn't recognize hanging around. The male kept having to chase it away. On banding day, we found unhatched eggs, and then we hunted around a little bit and found the scavenged carcass of the female. And you can see her leg band there on the right. So she was a great mother, had 3 or 4 chicks, took good care of them. Conjecture is she might have been killed by a great horned owl. There is a great horned owl that hangs around the visitor center area or that part of the point. And of course, as scientists, we want to understand what we had. So the eggs were taken to the San Diego Zoo Global, and necropsy were performed, and this shows how old they were. So they were close to hatching whenever what happened to the female, that tragedy, because 27 days, they hatch at 31. So they were 4 days from popping out. It's probably a good idea that it didn't happen right after they hatched, because then they would have starved. So good news, we have a new mate. She's unbanded, so we don't really know her origins. There are nesting sites up and down the coast, so it could come from any one of those. Upper left is the female, middle is the male bringing food to the nest. That's our reliable 98M. He's on the upper right, and that's a mating scene on the lower right. So I was hopeful once I saw that, and yeah, we had success. So on the 21st, banded 3 chicks, and there they are on the lower right. You can see, again, at this age, the rubbery stage, not much feather development, very downy. And over the next period of time, those will start growing into real feathers, lose the down. So I think I've got some new pictures. This is actually yesterday. So those were our chicks. We had 2 males and a female. And the little guy on the left and the lower right here is the smallest male. He's 2 days younger. And here yesterday on the right is the older male. First day I've seen him flying. So he may have fledged yesterday morning, right before I got there, or probably more likely on Wednesday. And then on the left, we have a female, the older female, upper left. And I have some video of her doing her wing flap thing. And then the junior member of the trio is there on the lower right. And he hasn't been doing much, but he's waiting for all that commotion to clear out, I'm sure. And this again was yesterday. So our new fledgling is, let's see, all 5 of these photos are of 38AK. They're still learning the ropes. I mean, a little wobbly on some of those flights. On the left, he's coming to hassle his mom for food. And on the right, he's coming to hassle his dad for food. And it was great fun. I only left last night or yesterday when the tide chased me away. But it was quite an education. They were both supportive, but also holding back. So the only food that transpired went to the nest. And it also appeared they were giving a little bit of lessons to the fledgling on, places to perch and kind of tag teaming around with him. So that was very cool. And I was treated toward the end with this fantastic prey exchange. So they do this ritually before mating, and they also do it at this stage. The mom needs to get out for exercise. You can actually see in the lower photo, she's missing a primary. They get a little raggedy at this period. I mean, they're how many months now into being confined into that ledge and dealing with all these wings and talons and yada, yada. But yeah, so he brings the prey up. She's grabbed it, takes it to her hands. They split off, and on the right, she's bringing it into the nest. And that all took about 15 seconds. So don't blink while you're monitoring, or you could miss some really cool stuff. This is a history of banding at Cabrillo. I have not been able to find what year they were actually introduced. I'm sure it's in the records. It's called a hack. They actually built an artificial box and ledge on the cliff, introduced captive raised peregrines, and over time they became naturalized. So we only knew the identities because of some adult banding that occurred in 2015. And there are results. So let's see, 2, 3, I haven't counted up the total. And this year, of course, we have the 3. So I mentioned hard times. Most of us are of a generation when peregrines were sort of in the same status as brown pelicans, ospreys. DDT in the food chain caused nest egg thinning, and that would not support the weight of the mothers while brooding. So as I show you here, by mid-1960s, there weren't any in the eastern US. It was listed as endangered, and we lost 90% of the falcons in all of US, I guess in North America. DDT banned in 1972, and through some very active interventions, including 6,000 releases, we've now been able to get them off the endangered list. So a real success story. Oops, wrong direction. And here's a little bit of California data. I wasn't able to find any super recent authoritative information on San Diego. The number I found was 15 breeding pairs. That was from a Forest Service publication. Estimated 400 breeding pairs in California. That comes from Fish and Wildlife. And they're gradually moving inland. I included Channel Islands because this talk will be given for the Channel Islands folks, I guess next month. And that's for another round of questions. So back to you, Satara.
Perfect, great timing. We have one question from Eve. She has asked, do you know anything about the pair with the chicks in the nest by the rec center at Cabrillo Elementary School?
Ooh, I'm sorry. Let me turn up the volumes. I should have probably do the chat. Let me see if I can do the chat.
It's also in the chat. And then Eve, if you want to clarify, you can just go ahead and unmute and ask your question as well.
They are ospreys that are at Cabrillo Elementary.
Oh, well, that makes sense. There are ospreys that I have kept tabs of over the years are at Robb Field. There are also ospreys at the new Point Loma Lighthouse, the one down by the tide pools. They're a much bigger bird, white, and they're fish eaters. So, but hey, thanks. There's also a platform I know on Shelter Island. So ospreys have come improving pretty well. I never run out of fish.
Okay, great. We have one question from Pam. She says she's wondering why she's seen so few terns.
So few terns. Well, they don't nest by us. There used to be some, I don't know if it's how active it is there at the San Diego River Channel where it comes out. They actually fenced it off. I remember in the early 70s, that was quite a project. We had classes on least terns. Their primary area now is over by Coronado and where the seals train, North Island. But we don't really have suitable habitat. They want open sand. That's their nest. It's just basically laying them on the sand, cryptic coloration so that their protection is just not seeing the eggs, but they don't have a nest either. I have seen these terns, not very often, at the San Diego River Channel. So if you want, and it's always a good birding area, but if you walk along the bike path on the south side, right by Park at Robb Field, it's kind of tern season now. There are Caspians that I saw yesterday morning, and I guess Monday too, off the end of the point. And there are also Forsters around right now. So, yeah. So the long answer to, we just don't really have a good place until you get up to that sandy area, the river channel. And I've seen dogs running there, even when it was fenced off and all, people running their dogs. So I think if there are any there, it'd be a hard place, hard place to get by.
Great, thank you, Don. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So if anyone has a burning question they want to ask, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
And again, I can stick by and I can show you some videos. How about?
That's perfect.
So I'm going to get out of this and I'm going to stop share long enough. Oops. To go find my videos. The first one is a little, it's going to have some of the same information that I already shared, but it has some animations that I think are helpful. So
when I Googled the fastest animal.
Hold on, I have to share. This is always tricky. I have to share it in the right order.
When I Googled the fastest animal, this is what I got. A cheetah.
Can you see it okay?
A cheetah. A little mammal bias, maybe. The truly fastest animal on Earth has a max speed 3 times greater than the cheetah. Peregrine falcons can leisurely cruise through the skies between 40 and 60 miles per hour, but when they're diving toward their prey, they can reach speeds over 200 miles per hour. That comes out to 293 feet per second. It's like flying the length of a football field in 1.2 seconds, or the length of this DC block. So how is it even possible for peregrines to dive this fast? A peregrine falcon is around the size of a crow, weighing between 1 and 3 pounds with a wingspan up to 3.6 feet. They prey on other birds by dive bombing them, snatching them midair. The first thing you see when a peregrine goes into its dive, also called a scoop, is their bullet-shaped body. Notice how the peregrine tucks in its feet and sweeps back its tail and wings. This streamlined figure reduces wind turbulence, maximizes maneuverability, lift, and speed as it cuts through the air. It wouldn't be able to do this nearly as efficiently if it had broad wings, like a hawk or an owl. But the peregrine's wings are pointed and angled back. And because of its stiff, unslotted feathers, it experiences less drag. The wind would pull on these feathers on other birds. Peregrines also have a large keel, that's the breastbone. A bigger keel supports stronger tusk muscles. Acute vision allows them to spot prey a mile away. The nictitating membrane, or third eyelid, helps to maintain their vision in their high-speed dives. And the secretory gland keeps their corneas from drying out because of all that wind. But now this would be possible if the peregrine couldn't breathe. The airspeeds that peregrine falcons experience while diving would make it impossible for most animals to breathe. But they have a bone in their nostrils to slow down the airflow. They also have robust hearts that beat around 600 to 900 beats per minute. All birds have a vastly more efficient respiratory system than mammals. Then, to finally catch her prey, the peregrine is pulling around 25 Gs coming out of the scoop. Compare that to an F-16 fighter pilot who endures up to 9 Gs during some maneuvers. On speed alone, peregrines are formidable birds of prey, but it isn't their only adaptation of note. Footage from our friends at BBC Earth shows where this wanderer has made its mark in some unexpected places. After a sharp recovery from near extinction in North America, bustling cities with soaring skyscrapers and towering cathedrals have become mini peregrines' new kingdom, a plentiful hunting ground with high perches and deliciously plump pigeons.
So, hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to close out of this and we'll try that again. It's a different video. Let's see. So I'm going to show another video. I won't show the whole thing, although it only lasts a few minutes. This was largely taken at Torrey Pines. It's a pretty famous peregrines there. The birding photography community queues up in line at this time of year. Though I stay away from that, but to get a shot. What I like about this is it will show you their fearlessness. I'll put it that way. So let's share.
Just south of LA, the cliffs are home to the fastest animal on Earth. A living missile, the Peregrine Falcon. Her eyesight is so sharp, she can pick out prey more than a kilometer away. The size of a crow, speed is her weapon. With her wings tucked in, she dives at speeds of 300 kilometers per hour. A kick in midair. Her chicks beg constantly for food. But she is torn between feeding hungry mouths and guarding the nest. Anything that passes too close, she views as a threat. Five times her body weight, the brown pelicans ignore her warnings. A dangerous mistake. She scrambles to intercept. A yank on the face throws the hapless pelican off balance. One down, she circles back for the rest. A skillful bill flip takes care of another. And while she's
All right, I'll end that one there. I have watched them. I mean, you don't even see them on the cliff. An osprey a couple of years ago was the one that lives at the lighthouse, made the mistake of being a little too high on the cliff. Boom, we're after it. I think it was in March, maybe February. Took off after pelicans. It wasn't quite that dramatic show, but yeah, they're definitely an attitude. So I'm gonna stop sharing that, and actually I'm gonna reverse my order a little bit. I want to show you what it looks like in the nest. This was another Point Loma site. This was, I think, a year ago, and I happened to be there at just the right time. I have to, let's see. I will share it in a moment. Let's see. Share screen. I've posted this to YouTube, so you can watch it at your leisure if you like. These are 12-day-old chicks. This particular site, I can actually get a view. It's still like 150 feet away, so this is highly magnified. What about me? A lot of sharp objects in that nest. in that there. So at this age, it's pretty much just little white lumps trying to find warm places. The last video I will show, stop share, is a little documentary Cabrillo did. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. I haven't been able to find it on the web, but well,
The mission of the national parks.
Get that going.
The mission of the National Park Service is to protect the natural resources of the national park system for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. In the management of ecosystems, conflicts between species often arise. Here at Cabrillo National Monument, we're cooperating with our partners to extend the benefits of natural resource conservation. I'm Keith Lombardo, Chief of Resource Management and Science at Cabrillo National Monument in San Diego. A pair of peregrine falcons were found nesting on adjacent Navy property. They frequently use the park to forage for food, but they are also suspected to be preying upon a nearby colony of these terns, an endangered species. To resolve this complex issue, we worked with Navy biologists and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
I've entered almost 1,000 nest sites to dam chicks. And what I've found is if you're able to control the most aggressive and largest chick, all the other chicks become completely docile. And to have something come into the nest site that's much larger than their mom, that's actually holding them and grabbing them, it scares them. They think I'm going to eat them. My name is G. Pagel, and I work as a raptor ecologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I ban birds in general to try and figure out more of the life history of peregrine falcons. For an ecosystem, we have predators that are on the ground and we have predators that are in the air. A peregrine's role is to kill birds. By killing other birds, it's taking out birds that may be diseased or sick, or in peregrines, sometimes they'll take very healthy birds.
Since its listing as an endangered species in 1972, California least tern colonies have shown signs of recovery. However, in the past decade, the population has begun to crash.
Terns are now restricted to small postage stamps of habitat where they only may have a couple acres where they have their nests. And because of terns being concentrated in a small area, it makes it more prevalent as a feeding area for those predators that are going to be in the ecosystem anyways. So if we have a situation where a peregrine is a transgressor, we know that that peregrine is eating a lot of these terns. That bird will be captured humanely. It will be whisked away to Northern California as far as we can take it, and it will be released within 24 to 48 hours to capture. Some of them do come back. We know that peregrine falcons have returned back to Southern California. But what we've also found is, at least for the few birds that we've captured, those birds don't tend to go back and do depredatory activities at a tern colony again. Peregrine falcons have recovered from the brink of extinction. During my short 30-year career, it's gone from, say, for example, in California where we had just a couple dozen pair to now where we have an estimated almost 300 pair of peregrines. What you have here on the National Monument is a source nest where you have a great pair of parents, where you have clean food, you have a place where it's safe, where the birds can nest, where people aren't going to disturb. And you have an area where the birds are going to disperse from. They may go to Mexico, they may go out to the Channel Islands, they may go north along the coast, but they will help maintain that population. Being a peregrine is not easy. When you're diving at speeds up to 240 miles an hour, you can make mistakes. So in order to have a healthy population, you need to have a lot of peregrines that are still produced in order to maintain that population.
All right, so now I will stop share and we can shift to any more questions, but before I forget it, let's see if that'll focus. That's a peregrine egg, let's see, and that's a chicken egg. So they're pretty much the same size, but obviously a little different coloration. This is a replica, by the way. I don't collect peregrine eggs. So back to you, Satara.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those videos. I have a question from Mike Philbrook. He wants to know what's the best place at Cabrillo to see the falcons?
Well, I'll say this because we're all volunteers. Probably the best place this time of year is the saddle across from where the Bayside Trail goes down. If you, at that junction, you can look across, and the youngsters tend to roost on the tower south of there that's inside the little Navy compound. And so that's a good place to see them. Sometimes I've watched them zip around doing their flight lessons on both sides. That's also a good place to see the adults. So we often see them when doing morning herp surveys at that same location. Whale station is another one, whale watching station. I have seen them fly under me right there, right there where the glass windows are. And I don't know if it was hunting or just deciding to motivate, but yeah, those are two good areas. And of course, Torrey's another place if you want to see peregrines. I'm not sure the beach is open yet, maybe it is. Their nest, if you went to Torrey Beach and walked south along the cliffs, it's not very far, it's maybe a quarter mile, and they're pretty high up on the cliff. That's the same nest that you saw in that video with the pelican follies. So those are good places.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more questions on the chat box, so if any of you guys have questions, go ahead and just unmute yourself. You don't have to type it in.
Oh, here's a comment about one fledgling at Torrey. So only one made it this year?
See that too. All right, doesn't look like there's any other questions coming in. If you guys think of questions later on, please go ahead and email us at caber_volunteers@nps.gov, and I'll make sure the question gets to Don and that it's answered. Don, thank you so much for this awesome, amazing presentation. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to prepare it and to teach us about peregrine falcons. So thank you again. And thank you to everybody who joined in. Again, if you have any other questions, you know where to email us. And I will have Dan post a recording of this on VIP Voice if you'd like to take a look at this presentation again, or invite folks who weren't able to call in. So thank you, everybody. And with that, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Exactly on an hour.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you so much, Don.
So interesting.
Thank you, Don. Good to see you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. There's Carol. Hi, Carol. Hi, Larry.
Oh, goodness. All right. Bye, everybody.